JavaScript. So if I try to, because what JavaScript helps is that is it is used to tell, so I can use JavaScript to control the elements that I have on the page. I can use JavaScript to display things on the page. I can even use JavaScript to change this hidden gem to something else. That's what JavaScript does for you. You can use JavaScript to manipulate this and input any text inside it. It could be time. Inside here, we could use JavaScript to inject maybe a text inside it. You can also use JavaScript to fetch any text that is already inside this. So what I'm going to do is, from my JavaScript, I'm going to do three things. The first thing that I'm going to do is that I am going to accept whatever text. It could be text, it could be time that the user has imputed right here. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the date or compare the time. So the first thing is accept user input. The second thing that I'm going to do is to write some logic. The third thing that I'm going to do is just the output, which is what we have right here. So I'm just going to print the output on the page. It's as simple as that. These are like the three basic things that we are going to be doing in JavaScript, nothing much. So when the user inputs maybe the activity, it could be read a book, the time, and add the task, we are going to just make it appear on this page. So these items that we have right here on the page are not going to be static. They are not going to be static. They are going to be generated from JavaScript. So that's what we're going to be doing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to grab our form elements. So inside my HTML file, I have the form elements. Class name is header now. So I'm just going to give it an ID. When you're working with JavaScript, make use of IDs unless you want to maybe apply, it could be a class or a styling to a group of HTML elements that share the same class name. So you might want to make use of classes, but IDs are always better when you're working with JavaScript. And you can't give more than two elements on the same, you can't give more than one element on the same HTML document the same ID. So I'm going to copy the name, I'm going to copy the ID that I'm going to paste inside my JavaScript. So this is going to be a form element. Okay, so for me to target this form in my HTML, I'm going to write this line of code, document.select query selector. So what this line of code is going to do is that it is going to go to my HTML and scan all these HTML tags, and it's going to look for any HTML tag with the ID, or maybe the class name, or maybe the type name, or maybe the element name that I'm going to input here. So if I input form, it is going to look for all the HTML elements on this HTML document that has the form elements. Okay, so right here, since I don't, because if there is maybe more than one form on this page, I'm not going to be making use of form. I'm going to make use of something else. Maybe I could just say form 1, and maybe the second form is going to be form 2, just like this. But now I have only one form on the page, so I can just target only one form and do whatever I want to do with it. So the name is going to be form, but since I'm working with the ID, I'm going to put hashtag at the beginning of the name. If it was a class, maybe just like I have header nav here, I can just type header nav, and I'm going to put a period at the beginning of the name. It's similar to CSS. If you want to style something using an ID in CSS, you will use the hashtag too. So I'm going to remove this and put the form. So another thing that I want to do is that, you see how this thing is doing, like if I input a text and click add task, the whole page will refresh. This is not something I want, because if the whole page refreshes, I'm not making use of a database for this, and I'm not saving any state. So what happens is that if the whole page refreshes, everything that I'm doing on the page will clear, and that's not something I want. I want the page to remain stagnant, but I also want the content to be submitted, because someone might start asking me, okay, why did you remove the nav element if your intention was to stop the page from refreshing? Why did you change it to form? Well, the thing is that if I click the submit button right here, and this is a form, what the form is going to do is that it's going to grab everything inside the input tag right here, grab everything inside here and submit them inside this JavaScript. But if you're working with form, then you have to be grabbing each of these things individually, and that's not something I want to do. So I'm going to stop this from refreshing. To do that, you can just add an event listener. So in JavaScript, there is something we call event listener. So what this event listener does is that it listens for a particular event. So in JavaScript, there are so many types of events. There is submit events, there is on click, there is mouse leave, there is a whole lot of events. So the one that I'm going to be listening for is the submit, because this is a form. So I'm going to be listening for when the user is going to submit the form before filling it. And another advantage of using the form as opposed to using a nav, or as opposed to using a div, because if you use div here it will still work, but another advantage of using a form as opposed to using a div is that if I come here and put a required attribute, what this thing is going to do is that the user won't be able to submit this form unless they fill here. You see, if I try to fill, just like in some login pages, if you try to log in without inputting your password, it's going to direct you back, to a particular input field, telling you that you have to fill that one. It is very, very compulsory you fill it. Unless it's an optional input field, you can just skip it and submit it. But if it is something that maybe is very, very important, or it is very, very required, then using the form element is going to prompt the user to fill in the most important fields before submitting. You can write JavaScript code to do that, but using the form element is going to help you save you time. You don't have to start writing code from scratch to prevent the user from submitting it, or from submitting the form. So that's what the form element helps you to do. So I can also put it here too. So after typing in test here, if you try to submit, it will still tell you that you have to fill in this. So you can just use this to force the user to fill in all the input fields that are required before submitting it. So that's another thing that the form element helps you to do. So if I submit this, if I fill in this, it's going to refresh, and I don't want that, so I'm just going to add. This is a function, so the name of the function is add event listener. Form.add event listener. What this means is that I am adding an event listener to the form. Okay, so form.add event listener. That there are so many types of event listeners, but I'm going to add the submit event listener. I know most of you will not understand what I'm typing, but no problem, you get to understand it later. So there is a JavaScript course. It's actually a very good JavaScript course in the group description. You learn with project. It was actually the JavaScript course I took when I started last year. So with the help of that course, you get to learn, how to build stuff using most of the JavaScript concepts. So, and I'm sure the man also treated this event listener. You hardly even do anything with JavaScript without using it. So there's so many types of event listeners, but like I said, I'm going to be working with the submit event listener. So let me just do something. e.prevent. Okay, I'm just going to delete this line of code. So the first, these things are called parameters. So parameters are like the let me say the values that you put inside a function that the function is going to use to run. So for instance, the first parameter that we have is the event type, or maybe the event name. Then the second parameter we have here is a function. So inside this we are going to type e.prevent default. So what this line does is that it's like I'm going to be commenting every line here. Prevents the page from refreshing. So that's what this form does. So if I try to submit the page, this function is going to run, preventing the form element from submitting. So after filling in the whatever 1330, if I try to submit, so there could be a mistake somewhere. Let me just check very well. If I try to print maybe console log something in the console log, let me just log something in the console log to know whether this JavaScript is actually working. Hello world. I think I know where the issue is coming from. I did not add the JavaScript to my HTML. Let me be sure. So the issue is because I did not add the JavaScript to the HTML. So just like we use the link tag to link the HTML to the CSS, you can use the script tag. So when working with JavaScript, use the script. So the script tag, we usually add it at the end of the document, or at the end of the HTML content. The reason we do is not as if you can't add it here, inside here. Rather, the reason we do that is because when you add JavaScript at the beginning of your HTML, so the web page is going to load. Then if there is an issue with the JavaScript, it's going to prevent the HTML from loading, and you don't want that. Like, you don't want the user to notice that there is an issue with your website. Maybe before loading something happened, or you try to fetch an information with an API, and the information was not available. So because of that, the whole page would not load. So it's going to be a very bad user experience. That's why we add it at the bottom of the page right here, so that it is going to load when every other thing on the page has finished loading. You can also add it here. You can also add it at the top using an attribute called differ, just like this differ. So what this differ does is that even if it could be at the or even though it could be at the top of the page, or it could be inside the head element right here, your HTML is still going to load before loading the CSS. But like I say, it's always better to add it at the bottom of the page, because you might add it inside the head element and forget to add this differ attribute, and you don't know what might happen. So it's best to just put it here. So the attribute that we are going to use to grab the JavaScript file is src. This src means source, so I'm going to use it to grab it. The directory is almost in the same folder with our HTML file, so I'm just going to grab stuff here, and I'm going to refresh this. Okay, so I'm not going to uncomment this line of code. Let's see. Alright, so it is not refreshing anymore. So another thing that I'll need to do that is very important is I need to delete this line of code right here. So when I click the add task button, I want my input, or whatever the user inputs, to appear on the page. So I'm going to skip this number 2 right here and move to number 3, print the output on the page. And after printing the output on the page, I'm going to write the logic. So I'm just doing this in a way that it will be easy for you guys to understand. Alright, so first of all, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete everything you have on the page. So I might just use one. Another thing I will do is I'm going to put everything inside this. I'm going to put this div inside the container, so that if I want to inject this div from JavaScript, I'm going to inject it directly inside that container, and the container will now render it on the page. So to do that, I'm going to get this. I don't know how you type this thing, but I'm going to try to duplicate it. So I'm going to call this maybe task container. I don't know whether you're giving this class to any other element right here. Okay, let's see. Okay, it's not looking bad. I'm also going to give this ID to this. So what I'm going to do right here is that I'm going to try and inject this line of code, this one right here, from JavaScript. So I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it inside my JavaScript. So I'm going to use what is called string literal. So what this string literal does is that it helps you to paste HTML code inside JavaScript. So it is the button after the button before your button 1 on your keyboard. So this one, it looks like apostrophe, but it's not an apostrophe, it's just different from it. So you can use it to wrap the HTML file or the HTML code. And I'm going to give it a variable, or I'm just going to grab going to grab this container right here, the task container. So what I want to do is that I will try to I will try to inject a test or maybe anything from the JavaScript into this task container and see whether it will appear on the page. So if it appears on the page, I will now grab this and inject it into this task container through JavaScript. So that's what I will do. So the first thing first is that I'm going to look for this particular element on this web page through JavaScript. Like I said, that line of code is very easy. Just type document.querySelector and you will now input the ID name or maybe the class name. But since I'm working with JavaScript and since I'm working with only this element and I don't want to replicate this ID, I'm going to use the ID name. So from the JavaScript, I can just give this a name of task container. So another thing is that on JavaScript, if you're working in JavaScript, it's very advisable to use camel casing. This camel casing format means that if you want to join like 2 or 3 words, instead of using hyphen or using underscore, you make use of camel casing. So like we have here, add event listener, query selector. So the second word here, you don't space it, you just use the capital letter to join the both words together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change this task container to task container. So it's a JavaScript convention, document.query selector. So the task container name here is task container. So I'm going to put a hashtag at the end since it's an ID, and I think that's it. So used to target the form on the page. The task So I will now try to inject a test into this task container and see whether it will show on the page. So to do that, I can just type task container dot inner I think test content. Yeah, test content. Let's say harmony. Okay, so it's not showing on the page. I'm going to find out why it's not showing. So going back to my index or HTML, I have the ID here, task container. So I'm going to try and put this inside let me put it inside a HTML element. Another thing is that if you're having issues with maybe if you're having issues with JavaScript, it's unlike CSS and HTML that doesn't generate errors. So if there's an issue with your JavaScript, you can always refresh the page and go to the inspect tool and go to console. So that is where you will have an error, or maybe if it's generating an error, it's going to print the error right here for you to see. So this is an uncaught error. It says h1 harmony is not a function, so it means that I'm trying to call that as a function. So I'm still going to try and go back here and check if there's any error with my code. It's not a function. So let me just check if there's any error in the code. Let me comment this. Okay, and I'll uncomment this. Alright, so it's showing on the page right now. The issue was because this thing was just on the page and causing errors. So I'm going to remove this h1 element, and you can see the harmony is showing on the page. I'm not able to put this on the page through JavaScript. So instead of doing this now, I'm going to change this harmony with what we have here. So the thing is that these things right here, they are called variables. So what variable does is that they hold values. So I'm going to uncomment this, and I'll put it in a format that looks like normal HTML. So since this is a HTML, this is an actual HTML, it's not like a test. So I'm not going to use test content here. I'm going to use inner HTML. So what it's going to do that is going to inject it into this task container. It's going to inject the content inside this task container as HTML, not as text. Okay, so if I inject it, I'll come back to the page and I have almost the same thing as what I had initially. So I can just duplicate this, and I'll have more tasks on the page. So but now I don't want to be displaying this thing on the page. What I want to display on the page is what the user is imputing inside the task field, and also the time that the user is imputing. So to do that, I think we've been able to achieve this our second aim, which is to print the output on the page, even though this is not like there is no logic behind this. It's just like static static test. So I'm going to go here and I'll change this. I'm going to change this to what the user inputs, and also the time to whatever that the user inputs inside the time input field. So to do that, I am going to grab, I know some of you guys are confused, don't worry. So I'm going to grab the test and also the time. So whenever the user submits the form, I'll prevent the form from refreshing with this line of code, and I'm also going to grab the value of these things, the input and the time, the test and the time, which is also the task. So from here I'm going to create a new variable. This is going to be called time. So document dot select query selector, this is going to be, let me check the name. Alright, so the name here is time. I'm going to give it an ID. This is going to be test. Not test, let me just use task. I think I've not given this. Okay, so the ID is going to be task. The ID of this one is going to be time. So I'm going to go here and give this a variable name of time, and I'll also target the HTML element that has the time ID. So under here I'm going to look for this one, which is task. This is going to be task. Then another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and print their values through JavaScript to know whether the value I'm getting is the right one. So this console log is actually if you want to print the value of a variable in the console. So this part of the browser is called console. So you'll be going to this console quite often if you're working with JavaScript. So you'll be going here to see the output of whatever the console is giving to you. So I'm going to do console log time. So console log time, after filling in this, I'm going to print it. So it's giving me this HTML element, the whole element right here, this whole element. That's what I'm getting in the console log, but I don't need the whole element. What I need is just the value, which is this 1334. So I'm just going to go back here and specify that what I need is the value. I'll print it again. That's 1334 right there. Then I'll also print the task.value. So the task is showing here, the value is also showing. Now I don't want to just print this, I want them to display on the page. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to grab this, the time, and also the task. So I'm going to display them on the page, and I'm going to move this inside this function. And inside here, look at what I'm going to do here now, because our job has been made easy. So we've grabbed the time and the task, so it's just remaining for us to put it on the page, which is very simple. Just get this, delete it, and I'm going to use what's called the literal, and I'm going to put this time, the task, inside here, the time, inside here. But let's not forget that what we are putting inside here is not just the elements, we are putting the value. So task.value, value, that's it. So if I just input anything here and print it, it's going to be on the page. But now we also want to be able to print more things on the page, not just one. Let me just do maybe go to gym, go to the gym. It's going to print go to the gym on the page. If I type maybe read book, it's going to print read book on the page. If I change the time to like 3:30 or 3:20 or something, I don't know why this is not working. Okay, it's going to give me 3:20 a.m. on the page. I also want to be able to add more tasks. So what is happening here is that each time I print, each time I click the add task, so it's going to overwrite the content of this task container. So it's going to overwrite it. Overwrite it means it is removing everything that is on it before and adding a new one. So it's kind of replacing this one. So but I need it to be adding to it instead of replacing. So to do that, I can just put like a plus sign, let me try this, or maybe I can just go here and do in a way that you guys are going to understand. So this is the one that we want to add to the page, but we want to preserve the previous one that was on the page. So to do that, we are going to also grab this task container dot inner HTML, container dot inner HTML plus this new one. So whatever that was on the page before, this is what we have here, plus the new one is all one space on the page. That's it. But before I continue, I want to hear from you guys to know whether you guys are really following now, because everyone is just quiet. I don't know. Is there any question that you guys may have to ask me? Maybe.
Yeah, I jumped to JavaScript because I'm just seeing JavaScript for the first time. Like someone working on it for the first time. So
Oh, really? But like, are you following up? Are you
yes.
understanding it?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, Lio,
Same here. I'm following.
Berry, are you guys following up?
Wow, this is a whole new. Yeah, we are following,
Yes,
but
so yes.
this is very, very new. We are on a whole different level now. I'm just still observing.
So, alright, no problem. But I just want to be sure that you guys are following up. Okay. Alright. So now we
So
have
I
so
this.
think we
that
will need to do this like
the
two or
top
to three to four times
Yeah, we are going
to
to be
get
working on. We
more,
are
more,
going to
more,
be
more
working
familiar
with
about it.
JavaScript from now, onwards. So you have a question,
uh,
Lio?
Uh,
hmm?
At
No, I wanted to know if you said the YouTube video that you put in the group description that is very detailed. Is it going
yeah.
to show us like basics of all these things?
Yes. It's going to show you everything. Yeah.
Okay, but I understand the process though. It's just that there's a lot like just like getting to know the elements and stuff.
Yes, no
So
problem. You get to
I
know the
guess I
value.
definitely have to do that.
Yeah. You get to know the
Yeah.
JavaScript syntax with time. Okay. Okay. So after that,
Yeah. Okay. So one question, sorry.
yeah.
This add task, once you make this a form, the add task will submit automatically or what? Or it will start submitting automatically. Is that what you mean?
The art task. I didn't get your
Like
question.
this button here, once
Yeah.
you make the element a form,
Okay. Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yeah. So what the form does is that
I mean like once you make this element, okay.
what the form does is that when you try to submit something on the page, so the form will just grab it, and if maybe there is an input field
Okay.
that needs to be filled, something that is very very important, maybe a password or Java an email that you need the user to fill in before submitting the form, you can just use the form to check all the input fields inside it. So all the input fields that it is containing, like on the HTML we have two input fields, it's just two. So in most, maybe
Yeah.
if you're logging in, you're going to have, most times you're going to have two, email and password. But if you're kind of signing up, there are some websites that may require you to fill in almost 10 input fields depending on what website it is and what
Yeah.
information they need from you. So if maybe you're the developer or you're working on such projects and you don't want to be checking by yourself individually the input fields that the user has filled, you can use the form element to check it for yourself. You can just add this required attribute
Oh,
to each of the input fields, so that whenever the user submits, whenever the user clicks this submit button, so the form on its own is going to go through all the input fields inside it to find out the ones that are empty, and also to find out the ones that are correctly filled. For instance, if I try to input, if there is a this is like time, so let me use email. It's not like you can type anything you want to type here. When I go to input field types, you're going to see all the available types for the input field. So I have my type. I also have, maybe let's say the ID is time. So if I try to, on the page I'm going to have an input field for email. Okay, so if I put this required attribute inside it, it is going to tell the user to please enter an email address. So even if it is filled, even though it is filled and the like the input field is not left blank by the user, the form element is still going to help and check the value that the user is inputting inside the input field to be sure that okay, this is actually in an email before submitting it. Because you don't know, some people, they might be in a hurry. Like most times, most people, they don't even want to sign up, they just want to fill anything like on their keyboard and just click submit. So if you don't check those things, you'll be surprised the kind of things that you're going to see on your database. Because once you click, in most websites, once you click the sign up button, the information that you give to them is being stored on a database. So if you don't check those information, you'll be surprised the kind of things you'll be seeing there. So that's what the form element helps you to do. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So if I'm having a form element, I need that button to be inside the form, right?
Yes. If the button is outside the form, then it's not part of the form. So the submit button has to be inside the form. So we are supposed to put an we are supposed to put an attribute of type which is submit. There are so many types of button. There are like, let me see. There is a reset button. Reset button is the one that you click to reset everything. Once you hit it, it will reset everything you have here. Okay, but by default, the one,
Okay.
if you don't put it, so the form is going to assume that is a submit button. So by default, it's going to give it the type of submit.
Okay.
But most times you have to see submit here.
Okay.
So once you check this Mozilla Firefox page, you will see that the input field has a lot of, like, these are some of the attributes and some of the types. Like these are the types. So you can change this. You can even change this input field to a button simply by giving it a type button. So once you give it a button, this is not a button. It's no longer an email this thing. Then you can also check their page for other. This is a checkbox like this one. So
Okay.
in your spare time, you
Okay.
can just go through this. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry. In a situation whereby we have the to-do list already and we don't want to be typing inside that input type, can we use drop down?
Yeah, if you have like, if you don't want the user to be able to create their own list, if you don't want the user to, if you don't just want the user to have that flexibility of creating whatever event that they want, but since it's a to do list app, the user should have the ability to create whatever task they want to do. But yeah, you can also give them a drop down and limit the options, that they can have.
Okay.
So another thing that we will do here is the time. So this one is actually going to be somehow tricky, but I'm going to work on it. So what we want to do, I, I don't even have, I don't have the initial HTML page. So what we want to do is that we want to change this time depending on what we have, depending on the current time. So if the time is like, you know maybe sometime in the past, we'll change the background color to red. If it's if it's um s- sometime in the future, we'll change the background color to green. But if it is the current time, we'll change it to yellow. So that's the logic that I was talking about here. Where is it? Yeah, this logic.
Oh, okay, nice. I'd love to see that.
Yes. Okay, you were building it and you didn't know that was it. That was like
No, I didn't know that was what we tried that yeah.
okay. So that is what I intended to put there, you know. Alright, to just do that, I'm going to use a HTML. No, why am I always saying HTML? So I'm going to use a date module, JavaScript date module. So what this date module does is that it helps us to grab the time on the system. So for this date module to work perfectly, your computer's date and time must be correct. So I'm going to use it, date or date module. Let me see current date. So this is the current date we have. If I try to print this current date, let me see what it will give us. So it's giving me Saturday, February 11, 2023, and the time is same as the time I have on my system. It's going to give you even the time zone and everything. So what we want here is just, I think it's just the time. So you can say get time. It's going to give you the time in, this is called units time. Okay, but that's not the time I want. I want to convert it to something else. Let me use this one. So it's going to give us this one this time right here. And what this thing is doing is that it is grabbing out of that the full date that we had initially. This function, which is to locale time string, is going to convert, or it's not just going to convert it, it's going to extract the time from that whole date and time output that we had then. So now I have the time. This one is always going to be updated because the time that I have on my system will always be correct. If I refresh the page, it will be working with the time that I have on my system. So another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use HTML split. Let me show you JavaScript split method to separate this. So let me show you guys split, JavaScript split method. So in your spare time, if you're learning JavaScript, just try to learn most of these things because it's going to help you code easily. So what this thing does is a strange method. So what it helps you to do is that, just like we have this, let me log this to console again, current date and time. So we have this time, but the hour, minute and second is separated by a colon. So we can separate this using the split method. So I can just do the split, and here is where you're going to put the delimiter. The delimiter is whatever value that is separating them. So I can just put the colon right here, and it's going to convert everything inside. It's going to convert everything inside this current date to an array. Okay, so you can also write down the things that you need to learn to really understand this tutorial. First of all, you get to learn about strings. You also get to learn about these are the things that you need to learn from that tutorial in the group description. So you learn about strings, learn about arrays, learn about numbers, dates. So these 4 things are going to help you, not just the concept of arrays are like, let me just help you guys. So array, a string is like a word. For instance, if I say name is equals to harmony, this value right here, this is a variable that is containing a string. So if I say maybe an array is used to store they can be used to store strings, they can be used to store objects, they can be used to store numbers. So array of names, harmony, Tunde, just like that. So you can use this array of names could now be acting as a kind of bucket that is containing names of 3 people. So if you want to work with let's say, okay, have you gone to your maybe your Facebook page and you go to your list of friends? So the list of friends there could also be referred to as an array of friends. So what the list does is that it helps to store information that are, most times the information are like related, okay, but it's not as if they cannot be separated. They are related, like Harmony, Tunde, they are just names. So arrays are used to store things that are like related, and they can be used to combine them, so that anytime you want to work with them, you can easily go there and grab it. Numbers are like, everybody know what numbers are. So number could be 5 or 2 or 10 or anything. So you can just do number 1 is equals to 5. So anyway, the number 1 variable is going to be seen as 5. So if I do number 2 10 and I do console log number 1 plus number 2, if you go to your console, you're going to see 15. Okay, so if you assign, it's called assigning. If you assign a value to a variable, the variable is going to be seen as that value everywhere in your JavaScript code. So the value is going to be seen as the same, the variable is going to be seen as that value in your JavaScript code. The reason why they give values to variables is because, for instance, if I'm working with this number 1 and I come here, maybe I want to use it for like something, maybe I want to also number 2 dot, or let me just say number 1 plus 35 40 plus number 1. So it's going to give us different values depending. So 35 plus 5 or 35 plus number 1 is going to give us 40. 40 plus number 1 is going to give us 45. So the essence of using, if I do 5, if I change this number 1 to 5, it's going to also give me 45. But the essence of using number 1 as opposed to using the actual value is because if, for instance, you want to change something in the future, it's almost like CSS customized variables. So you want to change it in the future, you wouldn't have to start maybe going to all the places where you have number 5 to start changing them manually. You can just go here, which is the main variable that is containing that value, and change the value. So once you change the value, it's going to be affected in every part of your code. Okay, so that's the essence of variables. There are so many uses of variables anyway, but that's like what they mean in a nutshell. So I'm going to delete these two lines of code. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this side. So let me log this to the console again and see what the value is. So I have this, but now I want to grab the R. So the R is what is going to help me to know what time we are on. So I can do this R time, or I can just do time in R. So I can just get this dot split. I'm splitting the full date, and I'm separating it by their delimiter, which is the colon. I'm going to log this time in hour to the console so that you guys can see it's the same thing. Now in let me show you guys anyway. When you're working with arrays, strings, and also objects. So in JavaScript we have arrays, we have strings, we have objects. So arrays can store strings, numbers, and even objects and dates. So we have what is called there's something we call indexing. So indexing means that you can target maybe you can target a part of that array and grab the element, or maybe a word, or maybe an item that you need. For instance, let's say I have an array of names. Now let's say, for instance, I want to work with Harmony, or let's say I want to work with Tunde on this page, and I don't want to start typing Tunde, maybe saying Tunde is equal to Tunde. Obviously when I log this to the console, I know that I'm digressing from what we are supposed to be learning, but I just want you guys to fully understand what we are about to go into. So if I log this to the console, if I log Tunde to the console, we are going to see Tunde right here. But now I don't want to give a static value to Tunde. I want to grab it from the array. So to do that, there's something we call indexing. Also learn about indexing. So what indexing does is that these things are indexed, like each of these values here, they have index, and the first item you have in an array usually have an index of 0. So the Harmony has index of 0, Tunde has index of 1, and Layo have index of 2. So that's how it works. So if I want to grab maybe the index, or if I want to grab Tunde, I need to check the array and know the index. So I can just count 0, 1. It starts from 0, so I can just do array of names. I'll just do index 2 or index 1. No, index 1 is Tunde, and I'll still get the same value. If I change it to index 2, I'll get Layo. So that's how indexes work. So what I'll do right here is I'm going to go to my time in R. It's already an array, as you can see. We have 21, 36, and 41. So I'm just going to go here and grab, I hope you guys can guess now. So we want the hour. So I'll just go here and grab the hour, which is in there 0, because from here the first element we have here is the hour, the second one is the minute, and the last one is the seconds. So when I log this to the console, let me see what I'm going to see. Time in hour, boom, 21. So even if the time on my system changes to 22, automatically this will change. The time in hour is going to change to 22. It's always good. You don't want to come here and say time in hour. If you check your system time, you say time in hour is maybe 21, because it's 21 here, which is obviously 9:37. If the time changes, if you give it a static value and the time changes to 10 o'clock, the static value is still going to remain at 21, and you don't want that because your code will not be working properly. So I'm going to remove this and put back. So each time I run this code, it is going to check my system and find out the current time, and that is the time that it's going to use for it. So after that, we now have to go into comparing the dates and the time with whatever the user inputs. So we have to go into that. That is writing some logic based on user input. So if the user selected time in hour is greater than current time in hour, show green. I guess that's the right logic. Yeah. Then it's less than, show red. It's same as time in hour, show yellow. Just simple as that. Okay, so most times if you're working with JavaScript, it's very advisable for you to write down whatever you want to code in a very simple terms. Like, it's called pseudocode, making it very very simple in a way that even you can understand it, because when you run into bugs, trust me, you would need to give yourself a break to understand what you're working on, or understand how to solve that problem, or even wrap your head around the problem that you're trying to solve, because you can just be coding and coding and nothing is working out. And if you don't take a step back and maybe give yourself a break, allow your head to cool off, coming back to that code, you won't be able to find the solution to it. But if you have it written down like this, you already know what you're working on. You just know that, okay, under here I'm just going to write a logic that is going to change the code to do a certain thing. Under this place I'm going to write a logic that is going to help me to know what I'm working on at any particular time. So the next thing that we are going to do now is comparing the time. I would like to put this inside here. Let's not forget, this is supposed to be the second step. This is number 1. Number 2. So I'm going to get a variable here. So the name of this variable is going to be color. So I'm going to do let color. So someone will ask me, why do you use let? Now there's something that I forgot to explain to you guys. You have the constant and you have the let. There are some JavaScript codes that you see var. So var is for variable. You can just say var, maybe var. Okay, you can't give two variables. You cannot declare two variables. So you can just do something else like color2. Var could be anything. So this var here is like, okay, let me just start from the let. So let is, for instance, if you plan or if you have plans of changing the value of a variable later on in your code, depending on some logic, if you have plans of changing it, you can use let. Okay, but if it's going to be a constant, then you have to make use of const. For instance, a name is a constant, something that doesn't change regularly in your code, so you can make use of const. Var is like almost like const. The only difference is that if you write if you assign a variable, or if you declare a variable using a var, that variable is going to be accessible globally. I don't want to go into all these things because I'm going to confuse you guys the more. Let's just stick to this. So I'm using color because the color is going to be changing based on some conditions. Okay, so under here I'm just going to write code if I might just put this in a function. So I'm going to write a function here. Also learn about function. So functions are like it's like, how do I put it? Functions are like a way of rewriting a code without actually rewriting it. Man, what a definition. For instance, let's say instead of you to always do add to number, so this function takes in number 1, number 2, and I can do return number 1 plus number 2. So this function basically what it does is that these are parameters, like what I told you guys here. So parameters are like variables that the function accepts, that helps it to process the output. So if the function takes in the first parameter and the second parameter, is going to return the sum of the two numbers. It's as simple as that. So if I call this function, if you want to call a function, just type the name of the function and put this open and close brackets. So now this function is not going to run without the parameters. So I'm going to put the parameters. Parameters could be like anything, but they have to be numbers. So I can just do 1 and 2 or 1 and 3, and I'll log this to the console. It's going to give me 4. Okay, so that's what it does. Instead of writing 1 plus 4 or something like that, you can just use a function. Now a function is that the another importance of a function is that the variables can always be changed, but the logic will always be the same. So that is it. So you can just use 1 and 20 here, and it's going to give you 21. So that's what a function does for you. So I don't want to start writing this. I'm just going to put it inside a function, and what a function is going to do is, it's always good to use a descriptive name when naming a function. So the name of this function is going to be determine color, determine bg color. So bg color means background color. There are two ways to write a function, so I'm going to use I'm going to use like the normal way of writing it. Alright, so what this function does is that it takes in a parameter. Now, who will guess what the parameter is? Well, the parameter that is going to take is just the two things: the time in hour, that means the user selected time in hour, and the current time in hour. So we are working with two time: the time that the user selects and the time on our system. So user selected time and current time. So what this function does is that if it will take these two variables and it is going to give us an output based on some logic. So the first logic is if if the user selected time in hour is greater than current time in hour, show green. Very simple. So in JavaScript we have what is called conditional statements. So you can use your if user selected time in hour is greater than current time in hour, boom, do something. Do something means show green, print something on the page, shut down the system. It could be anything. Okay, so this is just like a logic. So we have another one which says user selected time is less than current. What am I doing? Current date should be current time. Current time, yeah. Current time. Do another thing or do something else. The last one, user selected time is equal to the same. Let me get the logic. So it's equal to current time. Whoa. Do something else. It's just very simple. So this is just the logic that we are running. Now what we are going to do here is just to return green. Okay, so I want to return a green color. Here I want to return a red color. Here I want to return a yellow color. So if I give this function these two variables, it is going to run a logic, or it's going to run this logic, and any of them that is true, it is going to return green, red, or yellow. Simple. So now where do I call this function? I'm going to call this function in a place where these two variables are accessible. So where are they accessible? The current time is globally accessible because I created it at the beginning of my script. Then this other one, which is the user selected time, is only accessible inside this function. Whenever you create, I don't want to introduce people to a lot of things, but whenever you create a variable inside a function, that variable is only accessible within that function. It's called scoping, scope in JavaScript. You get to learn that later. So that variable will only be accessible within that function. When I say within that function, I mean within this opening and closing braces, these two right here, this first one and this second one, same as this one here, this first one and this second one here. So you cannot access time outside here. If I type time here, let me just do console log time, is to tell you that time is not defined. So that's when you get, even the color will tell you that it is not a variable, it's just giving us white color. the color of a variable should be, I think this is purple or something, but the white color already should let you know that this is not a variable. So if you go here and try to run it, let me refresh. I don't know why it's not giving us the error message. Okay, so I'll just go here and call the function. So I'm going to call the function inside here. So the first parameter, they must be called in this order, like I arranged it here. So the first parameter should be the user selected time. So I'm going to look for the variable that is the user selected time here, and I'm going to run it. So from here, the variable is this one, time. But let's not forget that this time includes both the second, no, the hour and the minutes. But all I need is just the hour. So I'll just have to log this to console first. I'll call this. So I have time.value. I want to split this. I want to remove the colon. So to do that, we already know exactly the same thing I did here. User selected time in R, time dot split. I'm going to log the user selected time in R to the console. Time dot split is not a function, so I'm trying to split the time when I should be splitting the value. So now from this value we are grabbing this one, which is the first one there, and now we have 03. Another thing I want to do is I want to convert this to number. This is actually a string, because a number will not be giving us 03. 03 is actually a string. So I'm working with numbers right here. So I can just do number. Let me see what it's going to give us. 3. Now the 3 is actually what I need, not the 03. So another thing that I'll need to do is I need to convert this one to let me log this one. Time in hour. Whoa. Time in hour for this one is 21. In next 4 minutes I'm still going to run it to see the time in hour. Then this one is 3. This one is just static based on the user inputs. Okay, then I'm going to call this function inside here. So the user selected time is what I'm going to put, user selected time in hour. And the second parameter that I'm going to put here is time in hour. I'm going to put the result in in a variable called color. I'm going to log this color to the console to see what it's going to give to me. It's giving me red, so I'll just try to know whether this thing is actually right. Okay, it's giving me red because these three, what we have here is 21 and 3 is a past time, so red is correct. I'll change it to like maybe 21, I think so. It's giving me yellow. Then I'm going to change it to maybe 22. It's giving me green, so it's sometime in the future. That's cool. Then another thing that I'll need to do is I need to come here to my HTML, and I'm going to look for the one that is supposed to have that background color. So I think is this one. Let me print this. Is this one. So I'm going to go here and check the color that Layo used for her stylings. Okay. So this one is the yellow, I guess. This one is the red, and this one is the green. So background color and color. So instead of returning the color, I'm going to return an object. So the color is going to be this. Background color is going to be this. So it's supposed to have green here, and I'm going to go here and I'll grab this, paste it inside here. I'll grab this one, paste it inside here. So for the red color, I'm going to get this. I'll paste it inside. I'm going to return an object. Color. Background color. The color for this, the background color for this one is supposed to be yellow, so it's just yellow. Background color is just yellow, and color is this. Okay, so I'm not going to print my color again to see what is returning. Color. So it's returning an object. So this is called an object. Okay, I forgot to tell you guys, this is called an object. Remember when I was telling you guys learn about objects, JavaScript. So objects are kind of used to store the same attributes of an entity. For instance, if you want to store an attribute of a student, you can say the name. Just like, let's say you have, just like I told you guys, an array stores information about students. No, like it stores the actual students, so objects stores the information about each student. Like I can say name, I can just say students, then I'll now do I'll now give maybe student 1, student 2, and all the rest. So if I have this array of students, I cannot come to the I cannot come to this first student and make it an object. So what this object does is that I can just give this a name of student 1. So it's not going to go into details in storing information about the student 1, maybe name is student 1, surname, to maybe something else, then class, maybe let's say class is JSS 1, current grade. So that's what an object does. So an object stores more information about a particular entity. So that's what it does. So I'm just going to go back here and check what this color is returning when I log into the console. So it's returning yellow because you see currently the time is now 22. That's why it's returning yellow. So before it was returning, I guess it was red. It was returning green before, I mean. So this is going to return something that looks like red, I guess. So now the last part of this tutorial is adding it. I'm not going to go to the stage of deleting it from the page because that's going to take another time. I'll spend so much time on this already. So the last part of this is changing the background color based on what the JavaScript returned. So as you can see, we're already applying our stylings from CSS. And if I want to change it from JavaScript, I can just come here. Let me see. So I can just go here and give this maybe background color. This I can just write styles. Background color of green. Let me see. Let me try styles. Am I even getting it right? The background color is green, but now I don't want to use green. I want to use whatever that is generated from this JavaScript. So I can just change this to color dot background color. It's going to give me that color. Then I'm going to type color 2. Then this color is going to be generated from JavaScript. So I can just do color dot color. So what I'm doing is that these things are called properties. So the properties of this object, this is an object. So if you want to maybe get a property of an object, you can just use the dot to get it. So dot color means that you're referring to this one. The background color means that you're referring to this one. So I guess that's it. If I change this color to like, maybe if I change it to 22, it's going to change to yellow. If I change it to like 23, it's going to change to. So these ones are like, these are like events that are going to happen in the future. It's like 1 hour from now, 2 hours from now. Then these are like, but all these events must happen today. So if maybe you try to run an event that's going to, if you add an event that's going to take place tomorrow, I'm sorry, it might be showing you red, because anything above 12 o'clock is going to, start afresh from 1. So if I impute maybe 20, maybe 16 here, it's going to show different color. I think this is the end of this tutorial. I wouldn't want to waste more time on this, because I've covered so much, and since you guys are still new to JavaScript, I would advise you guys to go through the courses that we have in the group description. If you have any question, you can also drop it in the group chat. So I don't know whether you guys have questions before I call it a quit with this tutorial.
No, it's not now. But please, can you drop the code for us?
Sure. The code is not even mine. I'm going to give it back to the owner. I'm going to drop you in the group chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Thank you. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
lot.
And
Indeed.
thank you for today.
You guys are always welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll be going through it. Thank you.